Story 1. Espichwenix cats have no hair on their bodies or around their anus, so when they sit on surfaces, they create suction and leave a ring of grease when they get up. Story 2. In some parts of Australia, up to 80% of wild koalas are infected with chlamydia, can be transmitted to humans. Story 3. Until the 1980s, surgery on infants was often performed without anesthesia as a standard medical practice. The belief at the time was that newborns' nervous systems were too underdeveloped to feel pain. Instead, they used a paralytic like curare to immobilize the child, who remained fully aware of everything that was happening. The trauma can affect people for life. Story 4. Aneurysms can occur at any time without warning, and there is no way to prevent them. Sometimes, a person can go to sleep and experience an aneurysm without any reason and die, or simply be living life and suddenly collapse. Story 5. Many viruses can change your deoxyribonucleic acid and cause permanent changes within you. The common cold can turn into autoimmune or permanent symptoms and complications more quickly than we think. Story 6. We have no way to detect in advance or respond to most cosmological events that would be classified as planet killers. Story 7. Everyone knows the government has regulations called filth levels concerning contaminants such as rodent hairs or roach legs in our food, and there are acceptable levels of these. What many people do not know is that filth levels also measure blood and pus in our food, and there are acceptable levels of these as well. Bon appétit. Story 8. The true scale of how far and large things really are in space. To get a comprehensible look, we have to shrink things by 1 trillion times. At that scale, the sun is just 1.4 millimeters wide, about the size of a grain of sand. The Earth would be 15 centimeters or half a foot away and about the size of a red blood cell. Only Jupiter and Saturn may be visible, both around 0.1 millimeters wide, and Saturn's rings 0.3 millimeters wide. Jupiter would be 77 centimeters away, or 2.5 feet, and Saturn 2.3 meters away, or about 8 feet. Pluto would be 5.9 meters or 20 feet away, and Voyager 1, the furthest human-made object, would be 25 meters away, about 1/4 of a football field. Alpha Centauri, however, would be 42 kilometers or 26 miles away, a whole marathon between grains of sand. The largest known black hole at this scale, Phoenix A, would be 590 meters, or over 1,800 feet wide. If this replaced Alpha Centauri, it would look larger than the full moon from Earth. Story 9. Some of you reading this are older than the scientific confirmation of the theory of plate tectonics. Story 10. I don't understand why it's so controversial, other than the usual, oh no, the evolution folks, but birds are dinosaurs. Not just descended from dinosaurs, but literally the last existing dinosaurs, Maniraptoran theropods, continuing the line of clade dinosauria. I have had people almost get up in my face saying that who weren't even on the fundamentalist side. Yes, it's a little different from what some of us older people learned in school, but this isn't a dire threat to our internal worldview. It's just scientific classification. I personally find birds cooler now. Story 11. A study was conducted to assess who people find sexually attractive. This included pictures of their siblings. They did not find their siblings sexually attractive. However, the set included slightly edited pictures of their siblings. These were found to be the most sexually attractive. Consider this the next time you are swiping through dating apps. Story 12. Dying from a disease is considered a spectacular failure of the virus or bacterium. Killing the host almost always ends the life cycle of the infecting organism. The best possible outcome is to produce billions of copies without any ill effect on the host or, better still, to provide some benefit to the host. A good example of this is the hantavirus in field mice. They will shed the virus by the billions over their lifetime, yet it seems to have no ill effect on the mouse. Story 13. Your memories are not like video recordings. Every time you recall an event, your brain actively reconstructs it, and it can be subtly changed by your current mood or new information. Your most cherished memories are likely the most factually inaccurate because you have rewritten them many times. Story 14. There is just enough potassium in the average human body to make enough gunpowder to load and fire a small cannon. Story 15. Ocean dolphins are known to aggressively attack river dolphins. It is a documented case of animal discrimination or tribal behavior. Story 16. Your brain might stay active for minutes after you are declared clinically deceased. In one documented case, brain activity continued for up to 30 minutes after death. Story 17. Romantic love is biochemically indistinguishable from having a severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. Story 18. Your eyeballs have their own immune system separate from your body's. If your body's immune system ever discovers your eyeballs, it will destroy them. Story 19. I think most people do not want to know about the millions of very small arachnids that live on our faces. Story 20. Some people have anesthesia awareness. They do not go under and are aware of everything going on. Imagine how you would find out if you are one of them. Story 21. If you do not get essential fatty acids from eating fat and essential amino acids from eating protein, you will die. Story 22. Processed meats such as bacon, ham, and sausages are classified as Group 1 carcinogens, meaning they are known to cause cancer. The same applies to all types of alcohol, unfortunately. Story 23. Your brain starts dying about 5 minutes after your heart stops. If no one helps you quickly, that is the end. Story 24. The world we see is not reality. It is a carefully constructed simulation created by our brains. Our eyes and other sensory organs are biological tools that have evolved to help us survive, not to provide a perfect, unfiltered view of the universe. For example, many plants and flowers emit or reflect infrared or ultraviolet light, which is invisible to the human eye. Bees and other insects, however, can see these wavelengths, and the plants use these hidden patterns to attract them for pollination. This shows that the colors and shapes we perceive are just a small part of a much richer visual world that exists beyond our senses. It is a common misconception that light travels from an object to our eyes, allowing us to see it exactly as it is. In reality, our eyes detect a narrow range of light wavelengths. This signal is then sent to our brain, which reconstructs the image and assigns colors to it. Colors do not exist outside of our perception. They are an interpretation by our brains of different light wavelengths. Every brain processes this information differently. A perfect example of this is the famous photograph of the dress, where some people saw it as blue and black, while others saw it as white and gold. The dress itself was blue and black, but both groups of people experienced a different version of reality based on how their brains interpreted the image. This demonstrates that our perception is highly subjective and can be easily influenced. Another relevant fact is that the feeling of having a singular, constant self is an illusion. There is no small person inside your head controlling your actions and thoughts. Instead, the self is a complex and ever-changing narrative constructed by the brain. It is an emergent property of countless neural processes working together. Neuroscience suggests that our sense of self is a kind of noise in the brain, a continuous stream of thoughts, emotions, and memories that the brain stitches together to create a cohesive story. The brain constantly tries to make sense of the world and our place in it, so it creates a main character for that story, you. This narrative helps us maintain a consistent identity, but it is not a fixed, independent entity. This is particularly evident in split-brain patients, where the connection between the two hemispheres of the brain is severed. In these cases, the brain's two halves can act independently, and the self as a cohesive unit breaks down. Research has shown that the brain's left side, which is often responsible for language, acts as an interpreter, creating a logical post hoc explanation for actions initiated by the other side of the brain. This suggests that the feeling of "I did that" is often a story we tell ourselves after the fact, not a direct cause of the action. Story 25. Not too scientific, but if you die at home and live alone, your pets might eat you, especially cats. Story 26. If our sun was a grain of sand, the closest star, Alpha Centauri, would be a grain of sand 26 miles away. If Alpha Centauri ever explodes in a supernova, it would destroy the Earth. Story 27. There are bugs eating your skin right now. Also, Demodex might sit near the follicles of your eyelashes and come out at night to feed and excrete. This is part of the sleep deposits and can get out of control. It is not good for your eyes when they do. Story 28. Some cancers can progress directly to the metastatic stage without a detectable primary tumor. Story 29. There is little to no evidence for the chemical imbalance theory of mental illness. We have almost no understanding of how neurotransmitters actually work, and almost every psychiatric drug is the pharmacological equivalent of throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if it is done cooking. Story 30. Roughly a quarter of people do not feel relief from morphine, even though it is the go-to painkiller after many surgeries. I found that out the hard way. Instead of giving me a different drug intravenously, they gave me a couple of pills. When I woke up from anesthesia, I experienced the full pain of a 6-inch incision on my leg through the muscle and the pain of the rubber device through my ankle for a good 2 hours. Story 31. Your lips and sphincter are made from the same type of tissue. The inside of your cheeks is the same tissue found inside a vagina. Story 32. Evolution is a fact and has acted on us just as much as it has on every other life form in the history of the planet. We are neither superior nor inferior to other life forms but the result of the history of life expressed over billions of years. Accept the grandeur and magnificence of this vision of life and our place in it. Story 33. The Food and Drug Administration has allowances up to a specific percentage for insect parts and rat feces in processed foods because almost all of these products contain them. Story 34. Somewhere in all of our family trees, at some point, we have all been the victims, beneficiaries, or perpetrators of racially based crimes such as rape, genocide, and colonialism. Story 35. There is medication that is approved by the Food and Drug Administration, is sold, and works as prescribed, but we do not know why it works. One of these drugs is Tylenol. Story 36. Herd immunity requires a high vaccination rate and fails if many people refuse to get vaccinated. Story 37. Eventually, every star will run out of fuel, and the entire universe will become dark and cold everywhere for the rest of eternity, unless it turns out that the universe is cyclical. The jury is still out on that one. Story 38. When X-rays were first invented, people believed there was a previously unknown fragile bone disease because they observed many children with multiple healed and partially healed fractures. However, it was actually child abuse. Story 39. Your body contains approximately 30 trillion human cells and 39 trillion bacterial cells. We all just jiggle around like Oogie Boogie with bugs inside. Story 40. There is no more or less water than there has ever been, which means it has all been through countless cycles, including passing through humans and animals. Story 41. Most people do not know that a theory is a challenging part of science. It requires substantial evidence for a claim to be qualified as a scientific theory. A much simpler term from the philosophy of science perspective is the term fact. A fact is an evident statement. Evident means obvious, something that was observed at least once by at least one person. A theory is a set of interdependent theorems, which must be falsifiable by at least one observation. Theorems themselves are statements based on facts on one hand, but also include yet unfalsified knowledge on the other. For example, the existence of God does not qualify as a scientific theory since it is impossible to measure or observe its existence. Especially, a believer would have to specify what to observe in case God does not exist. God's existence might be a fact, though, since some people have observed something through the lens of faith. You can probably see why the first one is more scientific than the second. Story 42. Telomeres are protective caps at the ends of chromosomes. It is possible to estimate how close a person is to death by analyzing the amount of fraying or damage they have. We have the ability to predict death to a certain extent, but most institutions avoid doing so due to ethical concerns. Story 43. Ancient viruses frozen in permafrost are being released by global warming. Can you imagine what happens when a 10,000-year-old virus comes into contact with humans? Story 44. Washing your hands with soap will kill many bacteria and viruses such as colds, influenza, and coronavirus, but it does not kill norovirus. Norovirus can survive hand washing but is rinsed away by water movement. Hand sanitizers and sanitizing wipes claim to kill 99.9% of germs. The remaining 0.1% includes norovirus, which is why it spreads quickly and easily. Story 45. Nematode worms. They are everywhere. in the soil, in the sea, and in every kind of plant and animal. They range from nearly microscopic to over 8 meters long inside sperm whales. They are inside you right now. If you removed all matter in the universe except for nematodes, you could look at the Earth and see where our cities used to be as a film of grayish worms. Story 46. Current research, though not yet published, shows a 99% correlation between Epstein-Barr virus and multiple sclerosis. Source: former medical student who visited the primate center conducting the research. Story 47. Women can feel their cervix. We just get the same treatment that the father of gynecology did to his enslaved women. I recently found that many men are offered pain relief when they need a prostate exam, and I was surprised. Women have had our cervixes poked, scratched, jabbed, and cut for years because a man experimented on slaves, and men receive sympathy and care for a finger up the rectum. Additionally, male doctors often tell women that periods are supposed to hurt, which is not true. Our pain is often dismissed despite our apparently higher pain tolerance, and the only reason given for our sadness or illness is being overweight. If men were treated like women at general practitioners, doctors, or hospitals, changes would be made to medical science very quickly. Story 48. Science does not care about your feelings, opinions, or dogma, and it offers something more beautiful and powerful than anything you can imagine. Story 49. Spiders can sense your body heat, so at night when it is colder and you are not moving and less of a threat, they will specifically come towards you. When you have woken up and seen a spider right by your face, the spider was indeed coming for you. Since most people sleep with only their head uncovered, the spiders can sense the heat most intensely there. Story 50. Rabies can remain dormant for a month, 2 months, or even several years. By the time symptoms appear, it is already too late. Story 51. Most people have had cancer at some point. However, the cancer cells were not strong enough to evade detection by our white blood cells and were destroyed before they had the chance to become life-threatening. Story 52. Earth's carbon calcite cycles have averaged 100 million years to complete over 5 global extinction events thus far. We are currently causing the next cycle to occur much sooner than it would have without human-caused release of atmospheric carbon dioxide. There is no reason to assume our species will be part of the next. Pave paradise, put up a parking lot. Story 53. I recently had an ablation and felt discomfort during the first 5 minutes, while the camera was being inserted and pressure was applied. It was not fun. Story 54. When you get a viral infection, even the common cold, many people feel unwell for a few days, then improve for a day or two, and then often feel worse for a longer period. The first phase is the viral replication phase, during which the virus hijacks your cells and forces them to make many copies of the virus. You may feel off and may have a fever during this phase. The second phase is the inflammatory phase. This is when your body recognizes the infection and generates inflammation to fight it. This causes symptoms like stuffy sinuses, higher fever, congested lungs, coughing, and aches. People with coronavirus disease 2019 often blame the antiviral drug Paxlovid for Paxlovid rebound, which is not actually accurate. Paxlovid works only during the viral replication phase and does not affect the inflammatory phase. This is why it is important to start Paxlovid as soon as you test positive. If a doctor advises waiting until symptoms worsen before prescribing Paxlovid or claims that Paxlovid causes coronavirus rebound, they have misunderstood how the medication works. It is not entirely the doctor's fault. Most family doctors receive only a brief lesson on viruses during their medical training, which is surprising considering how much more often colds are caused by viruses rather than bacterial infections. Story 55. Some species of figs can only be pollinated when a tiny female wasp crawls inside the fig to lay her eggs. She pollinates the fig in the process but dies inside. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.